Okay, good afternoon. We'll call this regular, a special board meeting for Wednesday, November 15th, to order at 4:30 p.m. We have Ms. Katrina Haddad again helping us this week as Ms. Melissa Olson is out of town. Roll call, please, Ms. Haddad.
Director Banks? Here. Director Daniels?
Present.
Director Jorgensen?
Present.
Director Loma?
Here.
Director Malpacum?
Here.
Director Nelson?
Here.
Director Ott?
Here.
So 6 board members are present in person in the boardroom, and Director Jorgensen is joining us remotely. Please join me as we observe a moment of silence. Thank you. Director Bankers, can you please make the motion to adopt the agenda?
Yes. I move that the Board of Education adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Haddad, roll call, please.
Director Banks?
Aye.
Director Daniels?
Aye.
Director Jorgensen?
Aye.
Director Loma?
Aye.
Director Malpacum?
Aye.
Director Nelson?
Aye.
Director Ott?
Aye.
The agenda has been adopted as presented. We do have executive session for roughly 30 minutes. Director Nelson, can you please make the motion to enter into executive session?
I move that the Board of Education convenes into executive session to discuss legal advice per CRS 24-6-402 4B, particular matter, Boe Sm's litigation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Ms. Haddad.
Director Banks?
Aye.
Director Daniels?
Aye.
Director Jorgensen?
Aye.
Director Loma?
Aye.
Director Malpacum?
Aye.
Director Nelson?
Aye.
Director Ott?
Aye.
The ayes have it. We will enter into executive session now and reconvene for the rest of our board meeting at approximately 5 p.m. in the boardroom. Okay, good evening to all of you. We are reconvening in public session, and there is no need to modify the agenda after executive session. For those of you who did not see the start of the meeting, the agenda was adopted as presented, and as this is a special meeting, we will only be dealing with the business aspect of the board meeting today. But before we do that, last week was Veterans Day, so Superintendent Gall, being a veteran, is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If there are any veterans, you can join him up here in the front, leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Any other veterans up here?
Draft. We can get a 40 and under draft. Does that work for anybody? 50 and
Okay,
under?
go ahead, Superintendent Gall.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What are vets? There's some good vet-looking haircuts out there, though.
So the first item on the agenda is an action item. It's a contract award. Director Ott, can you please make the motion for action item D1?
Yes. I move that the Board of Education approves contract C 2023-76 to the University of Virginia term ending June 30th, 2025, for a total contract value of $683,000.
Second.
You said 683,000, right?
$683,000.
Great. Yeah, just wanted to make sure I heard that right. Moved and seconded. Superintendent Gall, this is new information for our review. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, if I could have Rosa and Tamara come up, and Rosa will lead the conversation from the contract angle, and if there are any questions on the content, we'll have Tamara. But I just want, for all the community that's listening, we have a couple of contracts that we want to get closed out and done under this board as we get ready for the transition.
hear
And
me?
so
'Cause I can't
the
hear
special
anything.
meeting, what's that? Jason says he can't hear me? Great. Rosa, over to you.
I bring for your approval a contract that was awarded funding through the Colorado of Education. If approved, the contract will deliver leadership coaching and priority improvement or turnaround service to 6 elementary schools: Carver, Columbia, Martinez, Midland, Penrose, and Twain, and 2 secondary schools, Mann and Swaggart. The technical program representatives for this program are Chief Academic Officer, Ms. Tamara Acevedo, and Area Superintendent, Ms. Sherry Callback. First, it's important to share the well-coordinated process behind the scenes and the various stages associated with a grant that sometimes creates a sluggish start but often is seamless to all the stakeholders. Grant award notification lets you know your application was approved with some details, planning phase, and grant department and customer, and the contract work through all the programmatic details and scope, the details of the effort with the contractor within the funding limitations of the grant notification letter. Grant award letter lets us know it's official. This is when the customer begins working with procurement. Even grants that specify contractors, you have a demonstrated past performance and are still required to conduct price, fair, and reasonable due diligence. The customer works with procurement to ensure there is an apples-to-apples comparison. During this phase, the contract finalizes a proposal and timelines and outcomes. This often takes a lot of on-site coordination and site visits. Funds are received from the district and flow through the grants department to the customer and then to procurement. This last step is sometimes right away, sometimes it's not. It is not uncommon for us to start work to be paid for using other funding sources until the grant funds arrive, so as long as it is within the approved timeline. Designated grants represent restricted funds for a particular cause, which can include the use of specified service provider. The highly vetted process relieved the district from the competition process. The grant application process started with an increase in the number of schools ranked as priority improvement and turnaround totaled 17. Area Superintendent Callback wrote the application that was awarded funding through the Empowering Action of School Improvement EASY grant. The application was submitted in partnership with the University of Virginia, UVA. The district selected UVA based on their approach to building partnerships with districts and for their proven track record in school improvement. UVA was reviewed, approved, and successfully included in CDE's advisory list of providers for 2023-2024, and met the quality standards at the highest level, gaining a classification of approved with distinction. CDE's request for information RFI review and approval process included a review using their published rubrics and a body of evidence approach that included review of application forms, narrative, authentic work samples, evidence of prior impact, and references. Based on this review, CDE highly encouraged school districts to consider the providers on the approved advisory list when considering applying for the partnership under the EASY grant. The district identified the initial period of 2023 from the EASY grant, Title I and General Fund, and the district identified funding for the initial period 2023 from the Easy Grant, Title I, and General Fund for $237,800. Year 2, 2023, 2024, and year 3, 2024 and 25, will be funded by the Easy Grant in the amount of $445,200 for a total contract value of $683,000. If approved and fully executed, the contract will end June 30th of 2025. This contract aligns to the requirements of the Easy Grant. This acquisition did follow policy and the district's acquisition regulation. This concludes my overview of the University of Virginia contract, and I now turn it over to the Superintendent Gall and the Board of Education for any questions you might have.
Superintendent Gall.
It's just late to get the contract to the board. We've had a relationship with UVA on the grant being approved. We've now crossed the threshold amount that has to come to approval. We're working internally to make sure these timelines are tighter. If there are any questions on the wraparound services that we have with UVA, Tamara's here prepared to answer those. But this is cleanup of our relationship with UVA. And so if there are any other questions, the contracting, we're all there. This is the challenge sometimes with grants, is you start a relationship, and then how when you get to this threshold amount, we'll be thinking about creating some policy recommendations for the board to consider such that we don't look like we're operating outside of contract and now we're asking for contract approval. So we have a relationship with UVA. We have the grant dollars for that, but because we've exceeded a certain amount, we have to come to the board for that approval. Tamara, anything you want to add? 4 questions.
Yeah, I just would add that to apply for the grant, we had to seek superintendent and board approval. So we met with President Malpacum, the superintendent, myself, and Sherry Callback did. There's sign-off required on a letter that goes to CDE for the grant application.
I think that was about a year or so back, if I remember. Wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we have the exact, I think it was, which month? It was in the spring. Yeah. Yeah.
Looks like something else
Beginning
is
of-
coming.
Yeah.
You had requested another meeting with me in that regard.
Yeah. We'll have additional, so every year, there's opportunity to apply for these grants. And so we'll have additional
Yep.
signage according to grants that we'll apply for. I think the other thing that's really important to note is that there are certain requirements by what schools qualify to be able to even apply for grants based on their status and need. And so we get a lot of support and help from CDE in knowing what schools those are, the likelihood of them achieving the grant, and then also partners that we would work for. So in addition to what Rosa is talking about with the partners, how we identify through our processes in Colorado Springs District 11, they're also on the CDE approved and highly vetted vendor list.
Okay. Director Nelson.
Okay, so if I could summarize, the contract is for 3 years for the $683,000. The first year, the general fund and Title I funds had to kind of supplement the costs, but you're saying for the second and third year, the Easy Grant is covering all of what the cost is, so we as a district are not going to need to find money out of our general fund like we did the first year?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. It doesn't read that way. And I'm just thinking, like, when I oftentimes need to go back and refresh my memory, and I go back and read some things in board docs. So if we could just maybe add a sentence that says something like, general fund dollars or the district will not need to provide funding, just in the recommended action section at the very top there, that would be really helpful. Because it's like as I heard you explaining it, when I initially read through it, I was still a little confused about the dollar amounts and what was necessary on behalf of the
That is correct.
district.
This
Okay.
year and next year will be fully funded by the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
That's all I had for questions.
Is that something you want, Director Nelson, just to be clear, you want them to revise the language on board docs to reflect clarity?
Yes. Okay, of course.
Okay.
Of course. Of course, yes. You're welcome.
Director Art.
Thank you. For Director Nelson, the last paragraph mentions it. I understand that things aren't always clear, but it's, maybe you just need to move that paragraph up so it's like funding paid for.
Okay.
At any rate, I had a couple of questions. One, it sounds like University of Virginia has already been engaged with us. They have done the district account assessment. And is that a written document that the board can have access to?
Yeah, we have a written document. They've met with their team. We've implemented action steps. Yes, there is a written document that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
So
just-
we'll bring an academic review to a work session for you all for us to engage on the UVA and the instructional empowerment work. So we'll put together a work session on our wraparound services. If we could just have until after mid-year data, so we could actually have fresher information to be able to reflect with the inputs by both our wraparound services and how they match with the potential progress or lack thereof of the said schools. So if I could offer that, we would do that as a part of or a follow-on to mid-year data review, which is probably scheduled for mid-January.
Okay.
Does that meet?
Well, yes, I was just curious to see it, to know what, an outside group's assessment of the district and these schools in particular might be, to further anticipate what the need might be, which I'm sure you all are evaluating, but I was curious to see that, what the product of their first year was as well. Follow-up question. Why were some of our priority turnaround improvement schools chosen and not others? Specifically, of the list that we have from this year, Audubon and Galileo were not selected, but Carver, Penrose, and Martinez were. And I realized that was not necessarily the case last spring, when we didn't know where everyone was. But I was curious why.
Do you have the slide?
and
Can we
not
just
others.
pull up the slide? It'll play more visually. So we have two different levels of wraparound services. UVA is a slightly lighter touch than instructional empowerment. And so we met and made recommendation, and this came up last night in the DAC budget subcommittee conversation of where are our wraparound services. It was also briefed in a work session earlier last year on our actual network strategy, but we'll share it again. The schools that Director Ott's raised in session actually have more supports than this, and we actually added a couple, because remember when we had the conversation of are there 15 schools on the list or 17 schools on the list last year, we had a couple of schools that didn't have complete data for us to understand if they were going to be on the watch list or not. We added them to this wraparound supports list. So this, if everybody gears up and looks, this is our strategy of tiered supports. The basic school level support is what you get from the district. We believe in best first instruction. We have the area superintendent's model. We wrap around. And again, this is a year-old slide at the time. We only at that time had AICs, which were area instructional coaches, and the supportive curriculum and instruction. But the basic model for a improvement or performance school was to get the supports of the district. The next level up is what we call the UVA and the impact team schools. When we're using this, the model we have is the cable package. So you get basic and now you get basic expanded. And this is what you're getting is one day every 1 to 2 weeks on site with support. We were just in St. Louis with principal managers learning how to do principal coaching with other cohort members with the UVA Darden School of Business and Leadership hosted in St. Louis. There were, 25, 30 other districts at that location when we were there.
Yeah, several cohorts
yep.
at school districts nationally.
And then more expansive, the premium package, and now you had brought up Galileo and Audubon as having been priority schools. They're getting a much more intensive relationship with instructional empowerment. The thing that made these wraparound services so easy for us is at their core, all of them believe that the number one way to student achievement is access to highest quality instruction. They all speak BFI as a language, package. We do still are challenged with, well, one consultant or one wraparound service said blue and they really meant turquoise. Like, so we're still getting through that level. But at their core, they all believe the same way to improve what happens in the classroom. And so you're getting a more intensive relationship to Galileo as you are to Autobahn. And also good news, we were actually just notified today that, I don't know if it's good news or bad news, it depends upon how your perspective is. Both Autobahn and Columbia were bumped up a level on our request to reconsider on their SPF score due to some inconsistencies in how that's reported. But this is our full wraparound tiered level of supports is how we talk about it. And UVA is the one that's in front of you right now. Instructional empowerment came as a more traditional vendor of which we funded through ESSER dollars for the first 2 years. And so that's not here today for the conversation, but that's the complete review.
Thank you. That's great and excellent news for the two schools and good background information for all of us. The only thing just I would follow up on is more of a board thing, that our board president in the future, when grants are being considered and things, that might be something that you could pass on to the board or whoever is board president in the future, that these things would be on the horizon. I absolutely support more grants for us. People going to give us money, excellent. But just as a courtesy, heads up on that. Appreciate it. All right, thank you.
If that is the board's will, I'm happy to do that.
It's courtesy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Audubon, Superintendent Call just for Audubon, and what is the other school that
And Columbia.
they are no longer priority improvement
That's
schools?
correct. They're now improvement schools.
Okay. Director Bankus. Okay, you don't have any further questions on it. So just looking at this 3-tier level of support that we have in front of us, would Twain being the turnaround school, would it qualify to put that at the premium level of support? Or
So we believe the consistency of relationship and strategy is more important than changing those people. We are a relationships business. And so the team at Twain is very deep with our UVA and Impact team. And so what we've done is just increase the amount of time that they're getting with that team. So they're getting a premium level support through UVA, if I wanted to modernize that slide. But no, we don't want to shift that relationship at this time. This is a relationships game, and the traction that you gain, you lose by the reintroduction of new folks.
okay, thank you. Director Loma.
So was this a matching fund grant? Is that why we came up with the 237? No, it's just something we decided to do?
No, yeah, no matching fund. It's certain schools qualified for us to be able to apply for it. We were able to ask for a certain amount of money, but we didn't have to match anything to get
Well,
that. It was
they
just a
would
matter.
match us if we applied. How did we get the extra 400? Was it because we came up with the 200 and whatever it was? They would give us the other extra 400?
No, we applied for the grant in December. We got awarded the grant end of July. End of January. July is a lot farther off, one of the J months, end of July. And then we started the work to hit the ground running that spring with the readiness assessment, starting some of the coaching that we had as well. And so before we actually got awarded the grant and the money within that. So we did use some title funding to be able to start the work we knew we needed for our schools. But the award that we got from CDE covers the the majority, the bulk of the services provided.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Seeing no further questions, roll call, please. Yep. Turn on all the microphones. There you go.
Aye.
Director Bankus?
Aye.
Director Daniels?
Aye.
Director Jorgensen?
Aye.
Director Loma,
Aye.
Director Malpaca,
Aye.
Director Nelson,
Aye.
Director Ogg.
Aye.
The ayes have it. The contract that was presented to the board was approved. Moving to non-action items, the first one is certificates of participate resolution. This was something the board has been presented with information regarding this agenda item during several work sessions. And now Superintendent Gall, I will turn it over to you.
Dr. Comfort?
Dr. Comfort.
Good evening, Board. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about the COPs. First, want to acknowledge we have expertise in the room tonight. I know, first of all, that this resolution is not easy to read, and so they had to deal with lots of my questions, so I can imagine that the Board also has questions. So we do have Dan O'Connell from RBC, as well as Anthony, his partner, and we have Courtney from Butler Snow, who's our bond underwriter. So they will be here to answer any technical questions related to the resolution that you have in front of you. Just as a reminder, this is what's called a max parameter resolution, which means it sets a ceiling for anything that we could consider. So if the board were to approve this, there, in terms of interest rates and amounts of par, we can't go anything above that. If we were to go above that, we would have to come back to the board and have another conversation. Additionally, a max parameter resolution doesn't carry all of the details of the projects, because remember, if approved, it also starts a clock where we have 1 year from the date that the board approves to figure out the remainder of our project discussion as well as issue the COPs. And so it sets that timer. But before we get into the detail, I just want to do a little bit of level setting with where we are. That's okay. I mean, I really had a good lead in there. But okay, so I think we wanted to first have a discussion about recapitalizing districts and or doing any significant investment in districts. And there's really two theories of action that are present in school districts. And in the Pikes Peak region, there were two options that were taken. Many of the surrounding districts in our region considered a ballot question. And so on the board, you'll see the results of ballot questions across the Pikes Peak region. And what you'll find is, and this isn't a surprise, even though these are unofficial, ballot questions in large supply were turned down, especially around any capital investments or increases of MLO. D11 chose another path. We chose a theory of action of saying we want to utilize our own money first in a more strategic way. We don't want to go back to the community yet, and we want it to be able to recapitalize part of our district with our recurring funds. So this puts us in a really good position. We are now the district in the region that has the opportunity to still act, where many of our surrounding partners are unfortunately dealing with the results of their election, and now we're trying to figure out how to move forward. So I just wanted to kind of frame the COP with that lens a little bit to say we are now, if we move forward, we can be the first district to put a shovel in the ground and do really significant work in the region. And we know that work is slowing down because bond initiatives in large part are not happening. I believe from the school finance project, they sent us a list of all bond measures and MLO measures across the state, and less than 50% passed. And so that is our current reality. And we have to take that seriously as we plan our future. So I just wanted to kind of start with that. Also wanted to acknowledge that in the documents that were uploaded, in addition to the resolution, were more detail on call options. The board requested additional financial information on call options. What I will say is what was posted there, everything is there, but there's a lot there. So if you really want to see exactly what amount will be paid every single year, that's in there. But I wanted to summarize it in a way that was hopefully a little easier to understand. So if you see when we're considering call options, every single call option that you have is not assuming that we are going to pay off the debt early. That's not the assumption. They are sizing the COP right now. We will have the option to do that if we choose a call option at 10 years or 7 years, but it's not assuming that. So it's assuming that right now we're going to pay off the entire debt, which is $214 million in terms of principal and interest. Now, if we choose to move forward with a call option of 7 years or 10 years, and then the district is able, either through saving money or through a bond initiative or through a combination of both, to actually pay off one of those options at 7 years or 10 years, you can see the potential cost savings there related to interest. We will obviously have to pay off the full principal amount regardless, right? We borrow $120 million, we have to pay off $120 million. But if we're able to either refund, which remember is refinance in COP terms, at a lower rate, that will reduce the interest rate, or if we're able to pay it off at that call option, that is the amount of money that will be saved. So I know that that wasn't explicitly listed in that financial information, but I did want to call that out. So those are kind of the information about the call options. You have the resolution. Again, it's a max parameter resolution, which gives us the opportunity to continue to define things in terms of projects. And again, we can assign or sell those COPs within that year. That's also why you'll see a higher interest rate in the max resolution of 6%. Because right now it's not 6%, and we don't think it's actually going to get as high as 6%. But because we are not necessarily prepared to initiate the COP right now, we have to plan for that interest rate might go up again over the next couple of months. So with that, I turn it over to the board for any technical questions. I will bring up the crew to answer those, or any questions for me.
So, Dr. Comfort, just for clarity, at this point in time, when the board adopts this resolution, we got to make a determination whether we want a 7-year call option or a 10-year call option?
We do, yes. So the resolution that you have in front of you is a 10-year call option because that is the most commonly used.
Okay.
We have a 7-year. If you remember, in some of the data, we also included a 5-year. Mr. O'Connell can speak that we are very confident in those numbers of 10 years and 7 years. 5 years are very rare, and so that's the best estimate right now. So I think we would want to consider really heavily if we considered a 5-year, because it's just not as predictive as what we know in terms of 7 years and 5 years.
So
But we will have to decide, I apologize,
Right.
President Melpacum, we will have to decide between now and 2 weeks from now if we want to change that 10-year to a 7-year, and that adjustment can easily be made.
Perfect. I think, yeah, come on up.
It is indeed a max parameter resolution, so it could be left at a 10-year call as the max call, and then at the time of pricing, we could decide to do a 7-year. So to that point, you could just approve as is with the 10 being the max, should there not be any further, and then you could go down to a 7 at the point of pricing.
Okay.
So we don't need to revise
Okay.
as is.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarity. Dr. Bankus.
I don't know if we have talked about our general revenue flow that's going to cover this 10-year call. And if we have talked about it, I can't recall it. So as we look at our schools, we look at folks coming back, what is our projected enrollment, which determines our revenue? Are we going to continue to be able to sustain what we've already programmed for and then take on this debt? And I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, so a few clarifications, Dr. Bankus. First of all, this debt is planned to be paid out of our existing capital fund. So that's what's actually unique, and Mr. O'Connell can speak to this. We have an assigned amount of money already set aside for that. Many districts do have to do what you're talking about, which is we have to figure out this amount in the general fund every single year. That's obviously much riskier. We have that capital amount in perpetuity that we would use a portion of that to pay this debt down. In terms of our ability to pay off the loan earlier, that would have to be some decisions that we make in terms of, are we setting aside non-recurring money every single year, or is our strategy that we would use a bond election? Here's the good news about the bond. If you pass a bond, you have to accomplish almost all of those projects within a 3-year window, okay? So then I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we gonna time a potential call option with when we might go for a bond and try to get those things to sync up? Again, that's why the experts are here. They reaffirmed that as long as if we were to go for a bond next year, or the following year, or the following year, or the following year, as long as we put in our ballot language that we want to set aside X amount of money to pay off this debt, that can happen at whatever date that is in the future. So we don't have to have that overlap with that 3-year primary project window for the bond. So I think our primary strategy would be to include this in a bond. But we could, again, we could save money over the next 7 or 10 years and help pay off that debt as well.
Thank you. Then I want to be able to talk about the actual resolution. I was expecting it to talk about capital improvements, and yet I'm finding words like lease and rent and, well, those are the two that stand out the most. And I need to get some clarity about how it is that if we are looking at capital improvements, where does lease and rent come in?
Yeah, I'm going to do my best to answer that question, and then we're going to get the real answer. Okay, so remember that COPs are not considered actual debt under state law. I know they feel like debt, but they are annually obligated. So what this means is it's a relationship between the district and the bank, which is UMB for us, in which we say we have facilities that we have as collateral, and we lease those to the bank. The bank then leases those back to us for our annual payment. And so that is the rent. Now,
That doesn't make sense.
I hear you. Would you guys like to come up and explain that further?
Good try. I appreciate your effort. I do.
He did a great job.
He
I
did.
mean, so UMB is the trustee,
Okay.
right? And we're just paying rent essentially for the collateral that you already own. So that's why it's leasing. You're leasing it back from them, and that rent is what you're paying. And it's
So
annually
totally
appropriated,
different.
so it's not debt. That's
So-
important.
Okay, I interrupted you. Say that again. It's not debt?
It's annually appropriated.
Yes.
So it's not a multi-year fiscal obligation, otherwise it would have to be voted. And so you have underlying collateral, which is the schools, right? And so on an annual basis, the board appropriates or non-appropriates based on that collateral. Should they non-appropriate for some reason, that collateral then goes to the investors. That's never happened before, so hopefully it doesn't happen here. But on an annual basis, you appropriate or non-appropriate the payment of that rent, which is what pays for the COPs. Make sense?
Well, it's totally different from those of us who own a house, and we use the house as collateral. We don't rent it back from the bank after we've given it as collateral. They
True, but
just
you
take
own
it.
the house. In this case, because we're basically, it's a lease now, right? And that's why they qualify it as rent.
Okay.
Have we determined what those collaterals are going to be?
Yes, and that's basically based on the par amount of the
Yep.
borrowing, but we have identified that.
Yeah, so we did review the appraisal amounts of all schools, and what I'll say is, because of two things, the condition of many of our schools, and we haven't recently appraised many of our schools, including some of our larger comprehensive high schools, we don't have appraisal values that are very high I was surprised to see what some of those insured appraisal values were. So Russin, Sabin, and Mitchell are the three schools that we can, that will get us to that par amount to be able to, cover the collateral.
Russell, Sabin, and Mitchell.
Russin, Sabin, and Mitchell.
And
And in
tell
all
them-
honesty.
Tell them why, Mitchell.
Yeah, that's because those are the three schools that appraised at the highest amount.
'Cause we just
Mitchell
ma-
was recently appraised, and so it seems crazy to think, but Mitchell is appraising for $30 million more than Coronado. And that's because it was recently appraised.
Because of the work that the board invested in Mitchell, you have to get an appraisal to then get the assurance on all the HVAC that you all put in there about a year and a half,
Yep.
2 years ago.
Mitchell appraised more than Doherty?
Right, but it doesn't mean that the value is actually higher. It's because we haven't appraised Doherty or Coronado because we haven't made significant investment. So these are the details of how you actually get the collateral done. It's not that we think these are the highest or the ones that we would want to lose if there was default. These are just the ones that have actual appraisals that meet the obligation of the COP.
Director Bankus, are you done with
yeah.
your questions? Director Loma.
So let me wrap my arms around this a little bit. You said earlier that we have the money, our own money, and so what we're going to do is leverage what we have and use the bank's money, basically. So we have the money and we have the buildings as collateral, and I understand the lease buyback process, which is brilliant. And so we get to play with your money and keep our money here for other things. And the risk of public education going bankrupt is probably zero, because that just doesn't happen unless we have a nuclear war or something. But so the risk is very minimal for your bank because of the assets, and we do have money in the bank, correct? So basically, we're just gonna play with your money, keep our money here, do a lease buyback, which I get it. Okay, and it sounds good. Can you do that for my house?
Yeah, and I appreciate the comments, Director Loma. So you're correct. We do have money set aside in order to cover the payment schedule every single year. Obviously, we can reduce that if we so choose to follow a call option. I think something to note is, while we have money in capital programming, we can't do what we need to do with that amount in a yearly basis, right? So we do have to do that. We do have to say, we're gonna use this money to get more money to be able to accomplish more, and then we lock into being able to pay that down at a rate, because we won't be able to keep up with either interest rates or with the cost of construction inflation.
Yeah, but we have all this equity sitting here waiting for us to hug it.
Yeah, and just to note, this is exactly the same process the district has used when we've done previous COPs.
Yeah, good.
Director Nelson.
Yeah, just for the rest of the board members, the funding is coming out of our mill levy override bucket. So that's why that is a guaranteed dollar amount. That amount of money is not ever gonna go away. It's not based on the number of students we have. So we have allocated $8 to $9 million every year out of that bucket of money towards the interest payments. And then just so I get clarity, when will we decide whether we go for the 7 or 10-year call option? Or we're doing that tonight?
Well, so right now, as it's written, it is a 10-year call option. As Mr. O'Connell corrected me, we can make that change up until when we issue the COPs.
Sure, yeah. You don't have to change anything in the resolution, even on the second hearing. What would occur is we would then get in the process of putting together what's called a preliminary official statement, which is an offering document to investors. At that point, we're going to want to include that call option. That typically occurs a couple weeks before pricing. So at that point is when we would have to make that determination.
Okay, and is there, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So is there anything that would help us decide one way or another that like pricing might come back better on a 7-year than a 10 or vice versa?
Well, I can tell you pricing will be better on a 10 for
okay.
certain. The longer the call, because then the investors know they have that protection. It's not going to get called out from under them. So the longer the call, the lower the rate is going to be.
Okay,
But it's really, a matter of you determining and the board determining, okay, well, is it worth us to have that option 3 years earlier to have the ability to pay that off? And so that's really kind of up to the district to make that determination. But either way, on a 7 or a 10, it can certainly be priced. It's just a matter of what that interest rate differential is.
Sure.
And we did, and that's how these numbers were figured, that were presented, was based on those assumed interest rates.
Okay. Just thinking if I have other questions. I think just recognition for the board and the community that $94 million of potential debt is a lot, but as presented earlier, we saw neighboring districts try and request funding through another means, and it was not approved. And we have buildings that are average age 50, 60 years old, schools without air conditioning. So we're kind of at a point where we need to do something. And, you know, it's in the best interest of the students to give them air conditioning, for example, or bathrooms they feel comfortable in. That's one of the big things we hear as far as feedback from our students. And so that's where this funding is. We're going to start looking at putting projects such as those. We're still working out those details exactly, but just wanting to recognize it's a big commitment, but it is the right thing to do because we have to do right by the kids. So,
That's right.
yeah. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Yeah, just thank you. Thank you for adding that, providing that clarity that this money is coming first from the MLO funds. And so it's not coming from the general funds. So we do get that guaranteed money that's coming from. And then the second, what you talked about, we can wait longer. The construction cost is only going to go up at that point in time. So by doing it now, yeah, we incur the interest cost that goes with it. But the flip side of it, if we don't do anything 10 years from now to do the same modification or the renovation that we are talking about in Palmer, it could cost $100 million. So that's the second thing. And then for you, the question is, you said the resolution as it's written now, it's that 10-year call option. So when you do that pricing, would you have to return to the board at that point in time so we decide if we want to go with the 7-year option?
The resolution is a parameters resolution, as was mentioned, and it is also a delegation resolution. So it delegates the authority upon pricing for those types of decisions, such as the call date or execution of the pricing. And that delegates the authority to the CFO, or we changed
CRO.
it. I remember the last meeting we changed it, to the CFO, the superintendent, and if neither are available, the board president to make those decisions. So that's where we would currently be sitting, and you wouldn't have to come back to the board. We will obviously come back to the board for the second hearing of the resolution. But then after that, it's a parameters resolution, and as long as they fall within those parameters, that can be that pricing can be executed and delegated the authority, as we just discussed.
Okay. Thank you. Director Ott.
Thank you. I think actually there were some parts in there where any board member was getting sign-off permission. I was like, wow, that's some kind of authority for one individual. There was a whereas on page 2 that talked about there has been presented to the board and are on file at the district offices the following proposed forms, 4 of them. So my question is the 6th one down, whereas, just whereas there has been presented to the board. So will we see, before we approve this as an action item, the proposed form of the site lease, the lease, the proposed form of the continuing disclosure certificate, and the proposed form of the preliminary official statement relating to these certificates?
Please.
Those, a little shorter than everybody else, all of those documents are currently on file, and so the board, those can be given to you at any time. They are on file right now with the district.
All right, I guess then for my,
No.
all right, for my part then, I'd like to know where we can access those specifically, if we need to come in and read them here, or if we can get those added to board docs, what's appropriate.
Dr. Comfort? And if a director wants to access it, they can come to you? And you can provide-
Absolutely, yeah. I'm happy to send them to the entire board, or,
Just share them with the board.
yep, we'll do.
Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, that was all.
Director Nelson?
While I have you here, I was curious on page 5, section 7, it's talking about Series 2009. Why? Is that,
That's a good question.
That's not from a previous COP, is it?
It is, but
Oh.
that's the most recent, I talked about the preliminary official statement briefly. What we typically do, and you'd probably be better off answering this than I, but I'll give it a shot. What we typically do is we'll have a preliminary official statement on file, or at least a draft of it for the board to review. when we're looking at this resolution, but because we don't have a preliminary official statement on file yet or in a draft form, that's why it references the 2009 certificates. So I'm not sure as far as where we're at in the process when we come back for the next, for the actual second hearing and the resolution, if we'll have a draft on file. Right now, we're in the process of gathering information for the district to put this, what is essentially a prospectus together. And once that is on file and we have a draft, it'll be provided to the board. But that's why there's that odd reference to the 2009 certificates.
So at some point, that will be replaced with more current information.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. I had one last comment for just my fellow board members. Most likely, we don't know who will be here in 5 years, but just thinking through potential, timing for a bond to help pay off this debt earlier and get some of these savings. I have heard that going for a bond in a presidential election year is more likely to win because you get more younger voters that have kids into school districts, not in off years. And so that's where I was thinking, we already pulled the 5-year option, but I personally was thinking we would want to go for a 7 or 10. Just like I said, who knows who's gonna be here in 5 years, but it seems to me it would be wise to set us up for success in the future of a potential bond in the 2028 presidential election year, more likely to win than in an off year, and then maybe pay this off in that 7 to 10 year window. So just putting it out there for you all to consider, and if anybody's here at that time.
Okay. Any further questions? So do you need any further direction from the board at this point in time? If you have any further questions, this will come as an action item 2 weeks from now. We do not need to make any modification for the resolution as it is. So if you have any further questions, direct it. Otherwise, this would come as an action item. I don't think 2 weeks from now we need you in person at that point in time. All the necessary questions have been answered, but if you choose to be here, that's fine. I don't want to trouble you in getting back here during the holiday season, especially. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of you for being here. Moving to the next non-action agenda item, this is an MLO Plan Amendment. So this is regarding the expansion of the Mitchell Promise to the Promise. Superintendent Gall, I'm going to turn it over to you to review this information that is in front of the board.
Dr. Comfort?
Good evening again. Here tonight to talk about the expansion of the Mitchell Promise to the D11 Promise. Obviously, that is well underway. That was moving in September. If you remember, last year the board approved MLO funds to be used to cover what was then the Mitchell Promise in the amount of $200,000 a year for 4 years, $800,000 total. So since then, through philanthropic efforts and fundraising, we've been able to expand the Mitchell Promise really to the D11 Promise. And we're here tonight to discuss a plan amendment to the PIP related to the Mitchell Promise to basically changing that name to the D11 Promise. So just in terms of process, this did go through the MLO committee, and they unanimously voted in support of it. Tomorrow night, it will go to the DAC for a vote, and then if the board chooses, I will be back in 2 weeks for action here. With that, I turn it over to the board for questions.
Thank you. Questions? Director Loma.
I understand the rationale going to D11 Promise, but I kind of like Mitchell Promise because that's where it began. And, that could be the Mitchell Promise to D11 because it began there. So I kind of like that as well. But, I'm not going to, it's not worth me and you wrestling on the floor right now, but I just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I do want to acknowledge that part of this is the understanding that we are going to significantly underspend the MLO funds just on the Mitchell Promise. In large part because the original modeling that was done based on other Promise scholarships, we only had a few students at Mitchell out of the 30-plus students who are going with the Mitchell Promise who actually need MLO funding. Because it is a last dollar scholarship, all but 2 students are being taken care of through Pell Grants and other things. And so what we're basically asking to do is to utilize all of that savings to help fund the Promise across the district. And so we have modeled that out over the next 4 years. And unless there is a giant increase in attendance, we've already modeled out at least a 50% increase based on other Promise scholarships, we will have the funding to support the D11 Promise across the district. So that's in large part why we're coming, so that we're able to maximize the use of that money to benefit all kids.
Director Ott.
Thank you. Do we know other districts have this? And so I'm curious if that's part of your modeling, like Harrison District with your Dakota.
Yes, ma'am. We actually used Harrison as the model for trying to model out how many students will continue in their second year, how many students will need the Promise. So we've used that as the model. And in large part for Mitchell, it's accurate in terms of this percent of overall students, this percent of students have gone to Pikes Peak State College in the past as an average. It was very accurate. It just overestimated pretty significantly the amount of students who would need to use our Promise scholarship money. Every other data point has been pretty consistent.
So just out of curiosity then, what was the Harrison participation coming out of their high schools?
So the way, I have it written down. The way that this is modeled is we look at total school enrollment, we look at free and reduced lunch percentage, we look at the number of students who are seniors, we look at their average enrollment of that senior class over the last 3 to 5 years, and then we basically say we assume that the Promise scholarship will lead to an increase in 50%. So if a school had 60 kids on average, now they're going to have 90 kids. Then we take that and we multiply by the percentage that we have seen historically would qualify for Pell Grant and everything else. And that kind of gives us an average of the remaining students. And then we kind of look at the cost, right? This $167 per credit hour, 30 credit hours. And so what's the total cost? All of that is mapping out really well. The only thing that was, I think, and I don't think it was wrong, I think we just overestimated where, again, we've only had 2 students who have needed it, where our model showed that we would have 16. And so just that cost saving stacked over years allows us to expand to some other D11 students.
Do you have the numbers for Harrison? I think Director Ott was asking how many kids at Harrison, what's the percentage of kids at Harrison that are participating in the Promise?
I don't know their actual percentage. In terms of the enrollment from Harrison, it was around 50 to 70 students a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That was exactly my
I
question.
apologize, yeah.
No, that's all right. So much thought has gone into it, and I have to wonder if it was 2 instead of 16, because I know the idea came later in the year, and, obviously, more students will avail themselves if they know of it in advance, and you're taking care of that.
I think one of the things that helps the relationship is Lance Bolton at Pikes Peak, because Lance, in partnership with D2, brought this together through the Dakota Foundation, through their Promise Scholarship. All those players are influencing the D11 Promise. We are using the data from Harrison in our initial calculations. We're monitoring that, and Lance is still in partnership and I understand that potential MLOs coming forward from D2 in the future will actually seek to create even more funding for more promises. So we're attached to the successes and then the learnings of the Promise scholarships in Southern Colorado, which has really helped us accelerate very quickly.
Yeah, just to echo what Superintendent Gall is saying, I wish I was smart enough to come up with this formula, but it is literally the formula that was used between Pikes Peak State College, the Dakota Foundation, and Harrison.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think you are smart enough to come up with that formula.
Well, I haven't memorized that.
Okay. Seeing no further questions. So by the time this comes back 2 weeks in front of the board, you will have the DAC recommendation to.
We will. Yep,
Yeah.
I will be there tomorrow night.
Okay, thank you. That's all is there on the board agenda. Calendar review. We have a board meeting tentatively right now scheduled for November 29th. It's a special meeting. And then a special meeting on Wednesday, December 6th. Possibly right now, looking at the timeline, that December 6th meeting is when the new board will be sworn in. But that's all contingent on when the clerk and recorder's office here would certify the elections. So I will keep you updated as I find out that information. Adjournment, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Education adjourn.
Moved and seconded, roll call, please, Ms. Adams.
Aye. Director Benkes, sorry. Aye. Director Daniels. Aye. Director Jorgensen.
Aye.
Director Loma.
Aye.
Director Malpacum.
Aye.
Director Nelson.
Aye.
Director Ott.
Aye.
The ayes have it, so we are officially adjourned at 6:21 p.m. We will take about a 5-minute break and join for the work session down there at close to 6:30.